Recording in progress. Hello, everyone. How are y'all doing today? Um, so I've been kind of like contemplating how to go about this particular subject for a couple of weeks, and it's been on my mind. Um, so I'm kind of running through my thoughts as we go. Um, but I do have something I want to share with y'all too that I've been looking at, and I want to make sure that we dig in properly, I guess is the right way to say it. Excuse me. Hmm. Okay. I just finished my coffee and some grapefruit juice, so my saliva's kind of thick. Um, so we have as a country, as a nation, we've completely abdicated responsibility. And we like to turn the attention onto the federal government for good reason because we've handed off our responsibility as citizens and as parents to them. Um, I had mentioned in the last podcast that um, feasts traditionally held. We have one coming up next week, Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving feast. It was utilized in the West as a way to feed the poor. And so we would hold these big ceremonial feasts and invite the poor to to the feast, and everybody would eat and drink, and it would be a community thing. And this kept like a kind of bond, a coherence within the community where the community would stay together. And we don't do that anymore. I know there's people have tried to start a tradition of families going and working at local food banks or soup kitchens or whatever on these holidays, whether it be Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's, whatever, to do that. And that's all fine and good. But as a community, this is not something that is important to us anymore. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else. So don't like think I'm like pointing the finger. It's become like less of a tradition to be involved with your community on that level. And a lot of reason is because we don't have the ties to the community that we used to have, right? So you grow up in a small town and you pick up and you move to a big city where you don't know anybody for income opportunity. And so you've left your family behind, you've left all your long, close personal friends behind, and you're starting your life on your own and striking out there. And I always thought it was strange during my first marriage that my now, I mean, current ex-wife, but at the time she was my wife, um, was so intent on moving back to the Houston area where her parents lived. She wanted to be close to her parents. That was very important to her. Um, I wanted to be in Moss Bluff and Lake Charles, close to my family roots. I wanted to be in Louisiana, close to my roots. And this caused some tension between us at one point in time. And eventually I gave in to her will. I was like, all right, fine, we'll move closer to your parents. We'll do that. And we did. We ended up living with our parents for a little while until we could get on our feet in the Houston area. And then we bought a half acre of land and a single wide trailer, um, a 14 by 80 brand single wide trailer. I joined the military. So the plan was I go off to the military um, to get my training and use it kind of like on the job training or a school education so I could come back, so we could come back to Houston, and I could get involved um, with armed security or something of that nature. Um, and so we were going to rent out the trailer and the land while we were stationed in Fort Bragg for 6 years, and then or in the military for 6 years, and then we were going to come back, sell that, or either sell it or continue it as a rental property. It doesn't matter. Um, it None of that worked out. And that ended up getting she allowed that to be foreclosed on. She quit paying on it when I was in basic training. That got foreclosed on. The car got repoed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All kinds of bad shit happened. And that abdication of responsibility like created chaos within within our lives, and ultimately led to a divorce for many reasons, not the least of which was we were young, we had 3 kids, and I was away at the in training for military, and it really went haywire there. And my mom and dad, worked full time. My dad worked several full time jobs. He was constantly working. Um, I think I've told you all, like my mom would go days without eating, just to ensure that we all got dinner that night. And and so they didn't have a lot of time to raise us. They put us in daycares and stuff, and kind of like push that responsibility off on other people that they paid to 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 raise us in that period of time after school until 5, 6 o'clock at night, whenever my mom was able to get there and pick us up. And a lot of times my dad wouldn't get home from work until like 8, 9 o'clock at night. So a lot of times we had already eaten or gone already been in bed before my dad even got home from work. And you know, when my kids were coming up, even though I wasn't married to my first wife, and she had they had a stepfather that they were living with, and was raising them. They were both working, so they were working full-time jobs. My ex-wife was going to school and working, and the woman I was married to at that time, she wasn't working. She was pretty much staying home, trying to raise the kids. We were trying to survive off of 38 to $40,000 a year while I was starting off my career as a truck driver. And I had been thinking about it, and I was like, like I didn't like daycare. I didn't like being in there. I intentionally got myself kicked out. I started fights constantly until they just told my parents like he can't come back. I was about like 11, 12 years old at that time. So, um, and I was thinking, I was like, there's something like inherently like so cold about someone else raising your children, like somebody that has no ties to those children raising your children. So I had volunteered. I had talked to my wife at the time, and and we both agreed that she would watch my other three, she would pick up my other 3 kids after school and watch them until it was time to bring them home, and she would bring them home. And I talked to my first wife about it. She was freaking furious. No, we're not fucking doing that. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, they can come to my house and be in a place that they're comfortable and not be raised by people um, that have no emotional ties to them. It doesn't make sense to me. It would seem to me that you would understand that somebody that has the emotional tie to them would take better care of them. I don't want another woman raising my kids, is what she would say. I'm like, yeah, you're paying other women to raise your kids. All we're doing right now is discussing whether or not you should be paying for it. And she just, no. And it never came to fruition. And it always struck me. I was always like, I get it. Like your ex-husband's wife, their stepmom, you know, you could look at it as trying to step in and take your place, or you could look at it as you're paying someone to take your place. And you are literally paying strangers to take your place. And eventually, my kids no longer went to daycare. They were old enough to be at home by themselves, didn't need the supervision constantly. Um, I probably wouldn't have left them in as long as they were left in, but that's just me. I kind of feel like, once a kid's about 11, 10, 11 years old, they pretty much have, you've pretty much instilled in them like what you should and should not do. And they understand what getting in trouble is and how they should act, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, all kids are different. So, you take it for what it is. Your children may not be capable at that age, but um, I believed my kids were. Uh, and and I was like, this is such like an irresponsible thing to do, to hand off your children, not only to the government to raise your children and to educate your children, but then after that have a daycare pick them up and you pay these people to raise your children and teach them values that may not be aligned with your values. Um, and they're not only raising your children, they're raising, 20, 30, 40, 50 other children. So they're not even able to pay like individual attention to your children and make sure that your children are having their concerns or issues dealt with in an appropriate manner. And and so it always bothered me. And as I kind of dug in to the school system and how school operates, um, I I have looked less fondly upon sending children to public school. Now, by the time I started looking into this, my kids were already pretty much done with school. They were in their last couple of years of school, of high school, and they've all graduated and, you know, moved on with their lives. But I had a serious issue with the abdication of responsibility and not educating your own kids, not being completely involved in the education of your own kids. And so when COVID came around and hit, and all these parents were having issues with the way that their kids were being educated, I was like, yeah, like they're they're being taught some fucked up shit. They like kids have no business being involved in. Like this isn't what school's about. School should be about reading, writing, arithmetic, like getting them mentally prepared for the real world, getting them mentally prepared. And if you don't feel like the public education system is doing that for your kids, then you should find a way to educate your kids in some other way, whether it's one parent stay home and educate them, whatnot, But the public education system should be ruled out if they are abdicating their responsibility that you handed them that was originally your responsibility. So we just keep passing the buck down and we pass the buck along so far that even the education system that is in place today doesn't want to truly educate your kids. And so I was thinking of like, what's a good way to go about this? And I was like, John Taylor Gatto. He has a book called Dumbing Us Down. And interesting enough, it's available online for free. Um, I think it's might be the first edition, but it is available online for free. Let me see if I can pull it up. Now, y'all can see it, but I can't see it. So, so this is chapter one of it, and I just wanted to read through chapter one of this book because I thought it was like so impactful. Because John Taylor Gatto was a public school teacher in New York City for like 30 years, and it's called The Seven Lessons School Teachers, the first chapter, and it goes through the seven things that public school teachers focus on when educating your children. And I just thought it was so enlightening, and it should be read and understood by all people that have children or are thinking about having children. before you start looking at sending your children to a public school, you should definitely think about like what are the repercussions of sending children to a public school? What could happen to these children, and how much of their potential are you passing up on because you're focused on sending them to a public school? And we get all these, arguments that, oh well, children aren't going to be properly uh, uh, taught how to operate in society. They're not going to be um, have interactions with other children, and it's very important they go to public schools so that they have these interactions. Look, a parent's responsibility to their children to make sure they're being sociable and put out there and prioritizing how to teach your children to interact with society and how to think for themselves and how to set up a life and make goals and make plans and work towards those goals and have the discipline to work for their best life. This there's no the there's no one that has more dedication to your children than you do, and you cannot pass off that responsibility to other people and expect them to come out in any way, shape, or form that exceeds excellence, which is what we should all want for our children. We should all want excellence for our children. I would think most people want excellence for their children, minus the psychopaths that, drown their babies in bathtubs, but they don't do that during the school day. They do that at night, like you don't you don't have there's no time limit on that. That can happen at any point in time. So we should really be discussing the best way to prepare our children for the world, for life. And I was listening to Father Josiah Trenum yesterday. He gave a speech on the sexual revolution, and he made a good point. He's like, if you're involved in church and you're bringing your children to church and you're raising them in a God-fearing household, then that's like 18 years of being a catechumen, of learning how to shape their lives around God and around, Christianity. He goes, a lot of the catechumens I get into my church, they're catechumens for a year and then I baptize them. Like imagine 18 years of catechumen versus 1 year of catechumen. That's a massive difference. That's a long time. And so many parents are abdicating that responsibility and passing that responsibility off to the church and don't feel the call to raise their children in this way. And I was like, man, yeah, like, I hear things like that and I think, man, all the ways I fucked up. Like I fucked up so many different ways raising my children. And I've done the best I can, and maybe not the best I can, but I've made decisions that I look back at now and I'm like, okay, well, that might not have been the right decision at the moment, but that's the decision I make. So where are we now? What can I do to correct these errors, et cetera, et cetera? And a lot of times you can't. A lot of times there's no correcting the errors. There's only repentance. There's only apology. And you know, that's the way it goes. But let's get back to the school system. So this is written by John Taylor Gatto, and he starts it off in first person. Call me Mr. Gatto, please. 30 years ago, having nothing better to do with myself at the time, I tried my hand at school teaching. The license I have certifies that I am an instructor of English language and English literature. But that isn't what I do at all. I don't teach English, I teach school. And I win awards doing it. And so what he's doing here is he's laying out the general concept. He's like, as a school teacher, this is what is expected of me by the superintendent, by the school district. This is how I interact with the school, on behalf of the school. And this is what I'm doing in the classroom while your kids are present. This is how I interact with them. Teaching means different things in different places, but seven lessons are universally taught from Harlem to Hollywood Hills. They constitute a national curriculum you pay for in more ways than you can imagine. So you might as well know what it is. You are at liberty, of course, to regard these lessons any way you like, but believe me when I say I intend no irony in this presentation. These are the things I teach. These are the things you pay me to teach. Make of them what you will. One, confusion. A lady named Kathy wrote this to me from Dubois, Indiana, the other day. What big ideas are important to little kids? Well, the biggest idea I think they need is that what they are learning isn't idiosyncratic, that there is some system to it all, and it's not just raining down on them as they helplessly absorb. That's the task to understand, to make coherent. Kathy has it wrong. The first lesson I teach is confusion. Everything I teach is out of context. I teach the unrelating of everything. I teach disconnections. I teach too much, the orbiting of planets, the law of large numbers, slavery, adjectives, architectural drawing, dance, gymnasium, choral singing, assemblies, surprise guests, fire drills, computer languages, parents' nights, staff development days, pull-out programs, guidance with strangers my students may never see again, standardized tests, age segregation, unlike anything seen in the outside world. What do any of these things have to do with each other? Even in the best schools, a close examination of curriculum and its sequences turns up a lack of coherence, a host of internal contradictions. Fortunately, the children have no words to define the panic and anger they feel at constant violations of natural order and sequence, fobbed off on them as quality in education. The logic of the school mind is that it is better to leave school with a toolkit of superficial jargon derived from economics, sociology, natural science, and so on than with one genuine enthusiasm. But quality in education entails learning about something in depth. Confusion is thrust upon kids by too many strange adults, each working alone with only the thinnest relationship with each other, pretending for the most part to an expertise they do not possess. Meaning, not disconnected facts, is what sane human beings seek, and education is a set of codes for processing raw data into meaning. Behind the patchwork quilt of school sequences and the school obsession with facts and theories, the age old human search for meaning lies well concealed. This is harder to see in elementary school, where the hierarchy of school experience seems to make better sense because the good natured, simple relationship between let's do this and let's do that is just assumed to mean something, and the clientele has not yet consciously discerned how little substance is behind the play and pretense. Think of the great natural sequences, like learning to walk and learning to talk, the progression of light from sunrise to sunset, the ancient procedures of a farmer, a smithy, or a shoemaker, or the perpetuation of a Thanksgiving feast, preparation, I'm sorry, of a Thanksgiving feast. All of the parts are in the perfect harmony with each other, each action justifying itself and illuminating the past and the future. School sequences aren't like that, not inside a single class and not among the total menu of daily classes. School sequences are crazy. There is no particular reason for any of them, nothing that bears close scrutiny. Few teachers would dare to teach the tools whereby dogmas of a school or a teacher could be criticized, since everything must be accepted. School subjects are learned, if they can be learned, like children learn the catechism or memorize the 39 articles of Anglicanism. One of the things that strikes me here when he's talking about the sequences and the way that school's set up is like you might have been in a class where you go into school at 8 o'clock in the morning, and your first course is math, and then your second course is homeroom, and then you go into history, then you go to PE. Whereas somebody might start the day off with homeroom, then go to PE and come back to mathematics. There's no, it's not set out in a way that best enables the student to learn to think and to classify the different lessons in which is being thrown at them. I teach the unrelating of everything, an infinite fragmentation, the opposite of cohesion. What I do is more related to television programming than to making a scheme of order. In a world where home is only a ghost because both parents work, or because of too many moves, or too many job changes, or too much ambition, or because something else has left everybody too confused to maintain a family relation, I teach students how to accept confusion as their destiny. That's the first lesson I teach. Two, class position. The second lesson I teach is class position. I teach that students must stay in the class where they belong. I don't know who decides my kids belong there, but that's not my business. The children are numbered so that if any get away, they can be returned to the right class. Over the years, the variety of ways children are numbered by schools has increased dramatically until it is hard to see the human beings plainly under the weight of numbers they carry. Numbering children is a big and very profitable undertaking, though what the strategy is designed to accomplish is elusive. I don't even know why parents would, without a fight, allow it to be done to their kids. In any case, that's not my business. My job is to make them like being locked together with children who bear numbers like their own, or at least to endure it like good sports. If I do my job well, the kids can't even imagine themselves somewhere else because I've shown them how to envy and fear the better classes and how to have contempt for the dumb classes. Under this efficient discipline, the class mostly polices itself into good marching order. That's the real lesson of any rigged competition like school. You come to know your place. In spite of the overall class blueprint that assumes that 99% of the kids are in their class to stay, I nevertheless make a public effort to exhort children to higher levels of test success, hinting at eventual transfer from the lower class as a reward. I frequently insinuate the day will come when an employer will hire them on the basis of their test scores and grades, even though my own experience is that employers are rightly indifferent to such things. I never lie outright, but I've come to see that truth and school teaching are, at bottom, incompatible, just as Socrates said thousands of years ago. The lesson of numbered classes is that everyone has a proper place in the pyramid, and that there is no way out of your class except by number magic. Failing that, you must stay where you are put. Indifference. The third lesson I teach is indifference. I teach children not to care too much about anything, even though they want to make it appear that they do. How I do this is very subtle. I do it by demanding that they become totally involved in my lesson, jumping up and down in their seats with anticipation, competing vigorously with each other for my favor. It's heartwarming when they do that. It impresses everyone, even me. When I'm at my best, I plan lessons very carefully in order to produce this show of enthusiasm. But when the bell rings, I insist they drop whatever it is we have been doing and proceed quickly to the next workstation. They must turn on and off like a light switch. Nothing important is ever finished in my class, nor in any class I know of. Students never have a complete experience except on the installment plan. Indeed, the lesson of bells is that no work is worth finishing, so why care too deeply about anything? Years of bells will condition all but the strongest to a world that can no longer offer important work to do. Bells are the secret logic of school time. Their logic is inexorable. Bells destroy the past and future, rendering every interval the same as any other, as the abstraction of a map renders every living mountain and river the same. Even though they are not, bells inoculate each undertaking with indifference. Four, emotional dependency. The fourth lesson I teach is emotional dependency. By stars and red checks, smiles and frowns, prizes, honors, and disgraces. I teach kids to surrender their will to the predestinated chain of command. Rights may be granted or withheld by any authority without appeal, because rights do not exist inside a school, not even the right of free speech as the Supreme Court has ruled, unless school authorities say they do. I can vouch for that. I used to wear a shirt. I had a shirt that I wore to school that said Herb says no homos, and I got in a lot of trouble for wearing that shirt. As a school teacher, I intervene in my many personal decisions, issuing a pass for those I deem legitimate and initiating a disciplinary confrontation for behavior that threatens my control. Individuality is constantly trying to assert itself among children and teenagers, so my judgments come thick and fast. Individuality is a contradiction of class theory, a curse to all systems of classification. Here are some common ways in which individuality shows up. Children sneak away for a private moment in the toilet on the pretext of moving their bowels, or they steal a private instant in the hallway on the grounds they need water. I know they don't, but I allow them to deceive me because this conditions them to depend on my favors. Sometimes free will appears right in front of me in pockets of children, angry, depressed, or happy about things outside my ken. Rights in such matters cannot be recognized by school teachers, only privileges that can be withdrawn, hostages to good behavior. Five, intellectual dependency. The fifth lesson I teach is intellectual dependency. Good students wait for a teacher to tell them what to do. This is the most important lesson of them all. We must wait for other people, better trained than ourselves, to make the meanings of our lives. The expert makes all the important choices. Only I, the teacher, can determine what my kids must study, or rather, only the people who pay me can make those decisions, which I then enforce. If I'm told that evolution is a fact instead of a theory, I transmit that as ordered, punishing deviants who resist what I have been told to tell them to think. This power to control what children will think lets me separate successful students from failures very easily. Successful children do the thinking I assign them with a minimum of resistance and a decent show of enthusiasm. Of the millions of things of value to study, I decide what few we have time for. Actually, though, this is decided by my faceless employers. The choices are theirs. Why should I argue? Curiosity has no important place in my work, only conformity. Bad kids fight this, of course, even though they lack the concepts to know what they are fighting, struggling to make decisions for themselves about what they will learn and when they will learn it. How can we allow that and survive as school teachers? Unfortunately, there are tested procedures to break the will of those who resist. It is more difficult naturally if the kids have respectable parents who come to their aid, but that happens less and less in spite of the bad reputation of schools. No middle class parents I have ever met actually believe that their kid's school is one of the bad ones. Not one single parent in many years of teaching. That's amazing and probably the best testimony to what happens to families when mother and father have been well schooled themselves, learning the seven lessons. Good people wait for an expert to tell them what to do. It is hardly an exaggeration to say that our entire economy depends upon this lesson being learned. Think of what might fall apart if weren't trained to be dependent. The social services could hardly survive. They would vanish, I think, into the recent historical limbo out of which they arouse. Counselors and therapists would look on in horror as the supply of invalids vanished. Commercial entertainment of all sorts, including television, would wither as people learned again how to make their own fun. Restaurants, the prepared food industry, and a whole host of other assorted food services would be drastically downsized if people returned to making their own meals rather than depending on strangers to plant, pick, chop, and cook for them. Much of modern law, medicine, and engineering would go too, as well as the clothing business and school teaching, unless a guaranteed supply of helpless people continued to pour out of our schools each year. Don't be too quick to vote for radical school reform if you want to continue getting a paycheck. We've built a way of life that depends on people doing what they are told because they don't know how to tell themselves what to do. It's one of the biggest lessons I teach. Six, provisional self esteem. The sixth lesson I teach is provisional self esteem. If you've ever tried to wrestle into line kids whose parents have convinced them to believe they'll be loved in spite of anything, you know how impossible it is to make self confident spirits conform. Our world wouldn't survive a flood of confident people very long. So I teach that a kid's self respect should depend on expert opinion. My kids are constantly evaluated and judged. A monthly report, impressive in its provision, is sent into a student's home to elicit approval or mark exactly down to a single percentage point how dissatisfied with a child a parent should be. The ecology of good schooling depends on perpetuating dissatisfaction, just as the commercial economy depends on the same fertilizer. Although some people might be surprised how little time or reflection goes into making up these mathematical records, the cumulative weight of these objective seeming documents establishes a profile that compels children to arrive at certain decisions about themselves and their futures based on the casual judgment of strangers. Self evaluation, the staple of every major philosophical system that ever appeared on the planet, is never considered a factor. The lesson of report cards, grades, and tests is that children should not trust themselves or their parents, but should instead rely on the evaluation of certified officials. People need to be told what they are worth. 7, one can't hide. The seventh lesson I teach is that one can't hide. I teach students that they are always watched, that it's like a panopticon, that each is under constant surveillance by me and my colleagues. There are no private spaces for children. There is no private time. Class change lasts exactly 300 seconds to keep promiscuous fraternization at low levels. Students are encouraged to tattle on each other or even to tattle on their own parents. Of course, I encourage parents to file reports about their own child's waywardness too. A family trained to snitch on itself isn't likely to conceal any dangerous secrets. I assign a type of extended schooling called homework so that the effect of surveillance, if not the surveillance itself, travels into private households where students might otherwise use free time to learn something unauthorized from a father or mother by exploration or by apprenticing to some wise person in the neighborhood. Disloyalty to the idea of schooling is a devil always ready to find work for idle hands. The meaning of constant surveillance and denial of privacy is that no one can be trusted, that privacy is not legitimate. Surveillance is an ancient imperative espoused by certain influential thinkers, a central prescription set down in the Republic of the City of God, the Institutes of the Christian Religion, New Atlantis, Leviathan, and a host of other places. All the childless men who wrote these books discovered the same thing. Children must be closely watched if you want to keep a society under tight central control. Children will follow a private drummer if you can't get them into a uniformed marching band. It is the great triumph of compulsory government monopoly mass schooling that among even the best of the fellow teachers and among even the best of my students' parents, only a small number can imagine a different way to do things. The kids have to know how to read and write, don't they? They have to know how to add and subtract, don't they? They have to learn to follow orders if they ever expect to keep a job. Only a few lifetimes ago, things were very different in the United States. Originality and variety were common currency. Our freedom from regimentation made us the miracle of the world. Social class boundaries were relatively easy to cross. Our citizenry was marvelously confident, inventive, and able to do much for themselves independently and to think for themselves. We were something special. We Americans, all by ourselves, without government sticking its nose into and measuring every aspect of our lives, without institutions and social agencies telling us how to think and feel. We were something special as individuals, as Americans. But we've had a society essentially under central control in the United States since just after the Civil War. And such a society requires compulsory schooling, government monopoly schooling, to maintain itself. Before this development, schooling wasn't very important anywhere. We had it, but not too much of it, and only as much as an individual wanted. People learned to read, write, and do arithmetic just fine anyway. There are some studies that suggest literacy at the time of the American Revolution, at least for non slaves, on the eastern seaboard was close to total. Thomas Paine's Common Sense sold 600,000 copies to a population of 3 million, of whom 20% were slaves and 50% indentured servants. Were the colonists geniuses? No, the truth is that reading, writing, and arithmetic only take about 100 hours to transmit as long as the audience is eager and willing to learn. The trick is to wait until someone asks and then move fast while the mood is on. Millions of people teach themselves these things. It really isn't very hard. Pick up a fifth grade math or rhetoric textbook from 1850, and you'll see that the texts were pitched then on what would today be considered college level. The continuing cry for basic skills practice is a smokescreen behind which schools preempt the time of children for 12 years and teach them the seven lessons I've just described to you. The society that has come increasingly under constant under central control, sorry, since just before the Civil War shows itself in the lives we lead. The clothes we wear, the food we eat, and the green highway signs we drive by from coast to coast, all of which are the products of this control. So too, I think, are the epidemics of drugs, suicide, divorce, violence, and cruelty, as well as the hardening of class into caste in the United States, products of the dehumanization of our lives, of the lessening of individual, family, and community importance, a diminishment that proceeds from central control. Inevitably, large compulsory institutions want more and more until there isn't any more to give. School takes our children away from any possibility of an active role in community life. In fact, it destroys communities by relegating the training of children to the hands of certified experts. And by doing so, it ensures our children cannot grow up fully human. Aristotle taught that without a fully active role in community life, one cannot hope to become a healthy human being. Surely he was right. Look around you the next time you are near a school or an old people's reservation if you wish a demonstration. School, as it was built, is an essential support system for a model of social engineering that condemns most people to be subordinate stones in a pyramid that narrows as it ascends to a terminal of control. School is an artifice that makes such a pyramidical social order seem inevitable, even though such a premise is a fundamental betrayal of the American Revolution. From colonial days through the period of the Republic, we had no schools to speak of. Read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography for an example of a man who had no time to waste in school, and yet the promise of democracy was beginning to be realized. We turned our backs on this promise by bringing to life the ancient pharaonic dream of Egypt, compulsory subordination for all. That was the secret Plato reluctantly transmitted in the Republic when Glaucon and Adamantus extort from Socrates the plan for total state control of human life, a plan necessary to maintain a society where some people take more than their share. I will show you, says Socrates, how to bring about such a furbish city, but you will not like what I am going to say. And so the blueprint of the seven lesson school was first sketched. The current debate about whether we should have a national curriculum is phony. We already have a national curriculum locked up in the seven lessons I have just outlined. Such a curriculum produces physical, moral, and intellectual paralysis, and no curriculum of content will be sufficient to reverse its hideous effects. What is currently under discussion in our national hysteria about failing academic performance misses the point. Schools teach exactly what they are intended to teach, and they do it well: how to be a good Egyptian and remain in your place in the pyramid. And this is exceedingly important now because they're talking about getting rid of the Department of Education. Well, getting rid of the Department of Education is not going to change the curriculum standards state to state. They're still going to pretty much stay within the same framework that they're already in. What you need to do is you need to take back your children's education. You need to demand no homework and more physical activity, more hands-on training with your children, working on vehicles, learning how to do electrical work, learning how to do plumbing, learning skills that they can use day in and day out every day. None of this is inevitable. None of it is impossible to overthrow. We do have choices in how we bring up young people. There is no one right way. If we broke through the power of the pyramidical illusion, we would see that. There is no life and death international competition threatening our national existence, difficult as the idea is even to think about, let alone believe. In the face of a con- continual media barrage of myth. To the contrary, in every important material respect, our nation is self sufficient, including in energy. I realize that ideas run counter to the most fashionable thinking of political economists, but the profound transformation of our economy these people talk about is neither inevitable nor irreversible. Global economics does not speak to the public need for meaningful work, affordable housing, fulfilling education, adequate medical care, a clean environment, honest and accountable government, social and cultural renewal, or simple justice. All global ambitions are based on a definition of productivity and the good life, so alienated from common human reality that I am convinced it is wrong and that most people would agree with me if they could perceive an alternative. We might be able to see that if we regained a hold on a philosophy that locates meaning where meaning is genuinely to be found in families and friends, in the passage of seasons, in nature, in simple ceremonies and rituals, in curiosity, generosity, compassion, and service to others, in a decent independence and privacy, and all the free and inexpensive things out of which real families, real friends, and real communities are built, then we would be so self sufficient, we would not even need the material sufficiency which our global experts are so insistent we be concerned about. How did these awful places, these schools, come about? Well, casual schooling has always been with us in a variety of forms, a mildly useful adjunct to growing up. But modern schooling, as we now know it, is a byproduct of the two Red Scares of 1848 and 1919, when powerful interests feared a revolution among our own industrial poor. Partly, too, total schooling came about because old line American families were appalled by the native cultures of Celtic, Slavic, and Latin immigrants of the 1840s and felt repugnance toward the Catholic religion they brought with them. Certainly, a third contributing factor in creating a jail for children called school must have been the consternation with which these same Americans regarded the movement of African Americans through the society in the wake of the Civil War. Look again at the seven lessons of school teaching: confusion, class position, indifference, emotional and intellectual dependency, conditional self esteem, and surveillance. All of these lessons are prime training for permanent underclasses, people deprived forever of finding the center of their own special genius. And over time, this training has shaken loose from its original purpose to regulate the poor. For since the 1920s, the growth of the school bureaucracy, as well as the less visible growth of a horde of industries that profit from schooling exactly as it is, has enlarged this institution's original grasp to the point that it now seizes the sons and daughters of the middle class as well. Is it any wonder Socrates was outraged at the accusations he took money to teach? Even then, philosophers saw clearly the inevitable direction the professionalization of teaching would take, that of preempting the teaching function, which in a healthy community belongs to everyone. With lessons like the ones I teach day after day, it should be little wonder we have a real national crisis, the nature of which is very different from the proclaimed is is very different from that proclaimed by the national media. Young people are indifferent to the adult world and to the future, indifferent to almost everything except the division of toys and violence. Rich or poor, school children who face the 21st century cannot concentrate on anything for very long. They have a poor sense of time past and time to come. They are mistrustful of intimacy like the children of divorce they really are, for we have divorced them from significant parental attention. They hate solitude, are cruel, materialistic, dependent, passive, violent, timid in the face of the unexpected, addicted to distracted. All the peripheral tendencies of childhood are nourished and magnified to a grotesque extent by schooling, which through its hidden curriculum prevents effective personality development. Indeed, without exploiting the fearfulness, selfishness, and inexperience of children, our schools could not survive at all, nor could I as a certified school teacher. No common school that actually dared to teach the use of critical thinking tools like the dialectic, the heuristic, or other devices that free minds should employ would last very long before being torn to pieces. In our secular society, schools become the replacement for church, and like church, it requires that its teachings must be taken on faith. It is time that we squarely face the fact that institutional school teaching is destructive to children. Nobody survives the seven lessons curriculum completely unscathed, not even the instructors. The method is deeply and profoundly anti educational. No tinkering will fix it. In one of the great ironies of human affairs, the massive rethinking the schools require would cost so much less than we are spending now that powerful interests cannot afford to let it happen. You must understand that first and foremost, the business I am in is a jobs project and an agency for letting contracts. We cannot afford to save money by reducing the scope of our operation or by diversifying the product we offer, even to help children grow up and right. That is the iron law of institutional schooling. It is a business, subject neither to normal accounting procedures nor to the rational scalpel of competition. Some form of free market system in public schooling is the likeliest place to look for answers. A free market where family schools and small entrepreneurial schools, religious schools and craft schools, and farm schools exist in profusion to compete with government education. I'm trying to describe a free market in schooling exactly like the one the country had until the Civil War, one in which students volunteer for the kind of education that suits them, even if that means self education. It didn't hurt Benjamin Franklin that I can see. These options exist now in miniature, wonderful survivals of a strong and vigorous past, but they are available only to the resourceful and the courageous, the lucky, or the rich. The near impossibility of one of these better roads opening for the shattered families of the poor or for the bewildered host camped on the fringes of the urban middle class suggests that the disaster of seven lesson schools is going to grow unless we do something bold and decisive with the mess of government monopoly schooling. After an adult lifetime spent teaching school, I believe the method of mass schooling is its only real content. Don't be fooled into thinking that good curriculum or good equipment or good teachers are the critical determinants of your son's or daughter's education. All the pathologies we've considered come about in large measure because the lessons of school prevent children from keeping important appointments with themselves and with their families to learn lessons in self motivation, perseverance, self reliance, courage, dignity, and love, and lessons in service to others too, which are among the key lessons of home and community life. 30 years ago, these lessons could still be learned in the time left after school. But television has eaten up most of that time, and a combination of television and the stresses peculiar to two income or single parent families has swallowed up most of what used to be family time as well. Our kids have no time left to grow up fully human and only thin soil wastelands to do it in. A future is rushing down upon our culture that will insist that all of us learn the wisdom of non material experience. A future that will demand, as the price of survival, that we follow a path of natural life that is economical in material cost. These lessons cannot be learned in schools as they are. School is a 12-year jail sentence where bad habits are the only curriculum truly learned. I teach school and win awards doing it. I should know. Okay. So that's the first chapter of Dumbing Us Down. I would suggest if you haven't read the book, get it. It's not a very long book and it's very good, very informative. John Taylor Gatto is one of the God, what am I trying to say? He's one of the heroes that has exposed the the intolerable nature in which education system is run in the United States. And he's written several books on the subject. So y'all should definitely go read his stuff. But I thought that was important to get into that. You know, it's a major way in which we abdicate our responsibilities and pass the buck on to somebody else to take care of our kids in a way that is essential for their future and for the future of our grandchildren. So I thought it was very important to kind of touch on this subject for a minute, for an hour, for a minute, for an hour, right around an hour. So anyway, I hope y'all got something out of that. I will see y'all Sunday for third part of Saint Anthony, the life of Saint Anthony the Great, and have a good week, good rest of your week.